Have you ever watched a child fighting for their life while parents throw millions at the best doctors money can buy? The sight of a small body hooked to machines worth more than most people's homes, while specialists with decades of training shake their heads in defeat. Contrary to what most people believe, it wasn't the world-renowned oncologists from Johns Hopkins, the cutting-edge experimental treatments from Switzerland, or the $2.3 million in medical bills that saved 7-year-old Marcus Wellington from terminal cancer. I've researched hundreds of cases where expensive medical care failed and unexpected heroes emerged, and this story reveals something profound about healing that medical schools don't teach. By the end of this story, you'll understand why sometimes the simplest acts of love can heal what medicine cannot touch, how one woman's courage changed everything for a dying child, and why the most powerful medicine might already be in your own heart. Marcus Wellington went from having 3 weeks to live, according to 15 different specialists, to becoming a thriving, cancer-free 9-year-old today, proving that healing comes from the heart, not just from medical degrees or bank accounts. If you skip this story, you'll miss the moment that shows why every child needs someone who truly sees them as more than just a patient, and how the answer was hiding in the most unexpected place. The Wellington Mansion had been transformed into something resembling a private medical facility. What once housed elegant dinner parties now contained IV poles, oxygen tanks, and enough monitoring equipment to stock a small hospital. The crystal chandeliers still hung from the ornate ceilings, but their warm light now illuminated charts tracking white blood cell counts instead of illuminating laughter. 7-year-old Marcus Wellington lay in what used to be the grand guest bedroom, his small frame dwarfed by the massive mahogany bed that had been fitted with hospital rails. His Superman pajamas hung loose on his tiny body, the bright blue fabric a stark contrast to his pale, gaunt face. Dark circles rimmed his eyes, and his once thick brown hair had fallen out months ago, leaving his scalp smooth and vulnerable. Robert Wellington stood at the window overlooking his estate, his expensive suit wrinkled from another sleepless night. The tech mogul who had built a billion-dollar empire from nothing now felt completely powerless. In 18 months, he had consulted with 15 of the world's most prestigious doctors, each consultation costing more than most families earned in a year. The parade of medical failures had become a nightmare routine. Doctors 1 through 5 came from Mayo Clinic and Johns Hopkins, armed with traditional chemotherapy protocols that made Marcus violently ill, but barely touched the aggressive lymphoma coursing through his tiny body. Doctors 6 through 10 were experimental treatment specialists from Europe, bringing cutting-edge immunotherapy that cost $50,000 per treatment and required flying Marcus to Switzerland monthly. The treatments were so brutal that Marcus stopped speaking for weeks afterward. Doctors 11 through 15 included alternative medicine pioneers, holistic oncologists, and researchers working with therapies so new they didn't even have names yet. Each promised breakthrough results. Each ultimately failed. The latest specialist, Dr. Harrison from Boston Children's Hospital, had delivered the final blow just yesterday. "Mr. Wellington, we've exhausted every option. Marcus has perhaps 3 weeks left. I recommend making him comfortable." The medical wing of the mansion looked like a pharmaceutical warehouse. Prescription bottles lined every surface, morphine for pain, anti-nausea medications, experimental drugs with names Robert couldn't pronounce. Charts tracked every vital sign, every blood marker, every failed attempt at treatment. The monthly medical bills exceeded $200,000, but money felt meaningless when your child was slipping away. Marcus hadn't spoken to a doctor in 2 months. He'd stopped eating anything the nutritionist recommended. He refused to take his medications unless Robert held him down, which broke Robert's heart every single time. The boy who once ran through these halls pretending to be Superman now barely had the energy to lift his head. Robert's wife, Catherine, had left 6 months ago. "I can't watch him die," she had sobbed before disappearing to her sister's house in California. Robert understood, but couldn't forgive her for abandoning Marcus when he needed her most. Now it was just Robert, a team of nurses, and the overwhelming silence of a house where hope had died. James, the family's longtime butler, approached Robert hesitantly. "Sir, we need someone to maintain Marcus's room and manage his daily care. The nursing staff handles medical needs, but the boy needs personal attention. Someone to help with meals, companionship, basic comfort." Robert barely looked up. "Hire whoever you think is best. Just make sure they understand this is temporary." He couldn't bring himself to say what everyone knew: they were hiring someone to comfort his son during his final weeks. That's how Rosa Martinez entered their lives. At 45, Rosa had been working as a housekeeper for wealthy families for 20 years. She was a single mother who had immigrated from Honduras and built a reputation for being thorough, trustworthy, and invisible, exactly what wealthy clients preferred. What the Wellingtons didn't know was that Rosa had lost her own son Miguel to leukemia just 2 years earlier. She understood grief in ways that no medical degree could teach. Rosa's first day, she stood in the doorway of Marcus's room, taking in the scene that had become depressingly familiar to the household. Medical equipment hummed and beeped around a tiny boy who stared at the ceiling with hollow eyes. Expensive medications sat untouched on the nightstand. A Superman poster hung on the wall, the only remnant of childhood in a room that had become a medical prison. She didn't speak to Marcus that first day. She simply cleaned around him, quietly, respectfully, treating his space like the sanctuary it needed to be rather than the clinical environment it had become. But Rosa noticed everything: how Marcus's eyes followed her movements, how he still clutched a small Superman action figure, how he flinched whenever anyone in medical scrubs entered the room. Rosa's approach was different from everyone else who entered Marcus's world. While doctors spoke in clinical terms about lymphocytes and treatment protocols, while nurses focused on vital signs and medication schedules, Rosa simply hummed softly while she worked. Her voice was warm and melodic, carrying simple lullabies her own mother had sung to her decades ago in Honduras. On her third day, Rosa noticed that Marcus's expensive nutritional shakes sat untouched on his bedside table. The $50 per bottle supplements recommended by his dietitian had formed a small mountain of neglect. She watched as Marcus pushed away another attempt by his nurse to encourage him to drink the chocolate-flavored liquid that smelled more like medicine than food. "Mijo," Rosa said softly, using the Spanish endearment she had called her own son. It was the first word she had spoken directly to Marcus. "That doesn't look very good, does it?" Marcus's eyes widened slightly. No one had acknowledged that the expensive supplements tasted awful. Everyone kept insisting they were good for him and that he needed to try harder. "My son Miguel used to make that same face when I tried to give him medicine." Rosa continued, wiping down the windowsill with practiced efficiency. "He would scrunch up his nose just like you're doing right now." It was a calculated risk mentioning Miguel, but Rosa had learned that children could sense authenticity in ways adults had forgotten. Marcus studied her face, searching for signs of the false cheer that characterized most adult interactions in his world. "Did Miguel get better?" Marcus whispered. They were his first words in weeks. Rosa paused in her cleaning, giving his question the respect it deserved. "Miguel was very sick like you, but you know what he taught me? He taught me that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you keep going, even when you are scared." Over the following days, Rosa began sharing small stories about Miguel while she cleaned. She told Marcus how Miguel had loved superheroes too, how he had a Superman cape that he wore even to the hospital, how he used to pretend that his IV pole was his superhero headquarters. She spoke about Miguel naturally, without the careful tone adults used when discussing sensitive topics. Marcus began asking questions. What was Miguel's favorite superhero power? Did Miguel ever get scared of the dark? Did Miguel like to draw? Each question was a small gift, a sign that Marcus was still curious about the world beyond his medical prison. Rosa's most significant observation came during her second week. She noticed that Marcus couldn't keep down any of the expensive scientifically formulated meals prepared by his nutritionist. The $30 protein bars and $40 smoothie bowls came back up within minutes of consumption. But when Rosa brought him small orange slices from the kitchen, Simple fruit cut into tiny pieces. Marcus ate them slowly and kept them down. "Why oranges?" Robert asked when he discovered Rosa feeding his son fruit that wasn't on any approved dietary plan. "Sometimes the simple things work when the complicated things don't," Rosa replied. "Miguel taught me that too." Robert watched amazed as Marcus ate an entire orange over the course of an hour, the first substantial food he had consumed in days. The boy's cheeks had a tiny hint of color for the first time in weeks. Rosa began bringing small portions of homemade chicken soup made in her own kitchen with ingredients that cost less than $5. She served it in regular bowls, not the specialized feeding equipment that made eating feel like a medical procedure. Marcus ate slowly, but he ate. "The doctors say he needs specific nutrients," Robert protested weakly, though he couldn't argue with results. "He needs to want to eat first," Rosa replied. "Everything else comes after that." As days passed, Rosa noticed other things the medical team had missed. Marcus perked up when she hummed certain songs. He smiled slightly when she told stories about Miguel's adventures. He started asking for Rosa's stories, instead of turning on the expensive entertainment system that had been installed in his room. "Tell me about the time Miguel was brave," became Marcus's favorite request. Rosa would sit beside his bed and share carefully chosen memories. "Miguel was scared of getting his blood drawn just like you. But he told me that Superman probably got his blood drawn too to make sure he stayed strong enough to help people." So Miguel would hold his Superman figure and pretend he was helping Superman stay healthy. Marcus began asking to hold his own Superman figure during medical procedures. The small action made a remarkable difference in his cooperation with necessary treatments. Robert began finding excuses to linger near Marcus's room during Rosa's shifts. He watched fascinated and heartbroken as his son showed more engagement with this humble housekeeper than he had with 15 world-renowned specialists. Marcus laughed at Rosa's stories. He asked questions. He ate her simple food. Why does she succeed where everyone else fails? Robert asked himself, watching Rosa help Marcus with a small bowl of rice and beans that she had brought from home. Rosa treated Marcus like a child first and a patient second. She never spoke about his cancer directly unless he brought it up. She never made promises about getting better. Instead, she talked about being brave today, about finding small things to enjoy, about the way Miguel had taught her that every day had something good in it, even the hard days. "Do you think Miguel would have liked me?" Marcus asked one afternoon. "Miguel would have loved you," Rosa said without hesitation. "He would have said you have a superhero heart just like his." Marcus smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes for the first time in months. Robert, watching from the doorway, felt tears he had been holding back for weeks finally begin to fall. The crisis came on a Tuesday morning when Dr. Harrison arrived with another specialist, Dr. Rebecca Chen, from Seattle Children's Hospital. Robert had called her in desperation, willing to try one final experimental surgery that carried a 30% survival rate and would require Marcus to spend 6 months in intensive care. "The tumor has grown," Dr. Harrison explained, pointing to the latest scan images. "This surgery is extremely risky, but it's the only option left. Without it, Marcus has days, not weeks." Robert stood in the hallway outside Marcus's room, torn between hope and terror. The surgery would cost $800,000 and would require moving Marcus to Seattle immediately. Recovery, if he survived, would be brutal. Months of isolation, more chemotherapy procedures that would make his previous treatment seem mild by comparison. Marcus overheard the conversation. When the doctors left, Rosa found him sobbing into his Superman pillow, his small body shaking with fear and exhaustion. "They want to cut me open again," Marcus whispered. "I can't do it anymore, Rosa. I'm too tired to be brave." Rosa sat beside his bed, her heart breaking for this child who had endured more pain than most adults could imagine. She thought about Miguel's final weeks, how exhausted he had become, how the treatments had sometimes felt worse than the disease. "Mijo," she said softly, "can I tell you something important that Miguel taught me?" Marcus nodded, wiping his eyes with the back of his small hand. "Miguel told me that the best medicine wasn't always the most expensive medicine or the most complicated medicine. He said the best medicine was knowing that someone believed he was brave, even when he didn't feel brave himself. Rosa took a deep breath, making a decision that would change everything. What if we tried something different? What if instead of thinking about being sick, we pretended you were Superman, getting stronger? Marcus looked confused. But I'm not getting stronger. I'm getting sicker. Miguel used to tell me that Superman probably had to eat special foods to keep his powers strong. And Superman probably had to take vitamins, just like your medicine. What if every time you ate something, you were power-up time? What if every time you took your medicine, you were taking superhero vitamins? It was such a simple idea that Robert, listening from the doorway, almost dismissed it. But something magical happened. Marcus sat up slightly more alert than he had been in weeks. Like a game, Marcus asked. Like training to be a superhero, Rosa confirmed. Miguel always said that real superheroes had to do hard things to help people. Maybe your job right now is to get strong enough to help other kids who are scared like Miguel helped me. Over the next 3 days, Marcus began participating in his superhero training. Eating Rosa's simple chicken soup became power-up time. Taking his medications became superhero vitamins. Even the painful blood draws became checking Superman's strength levels. The transformation was remarkable. Marcus began eating more consistently. He started taking his medications without resistance. His energy levels, while still low, showed the first improvement in months. Most importantly, he began talking about the future again. When I'm strong like Superman, I want to visit other kids in the hospital. Marcus told Rosa, I want to tell them about superhero training. Dr. Harrison was baffled when Marcus's blood work showed improvement. This is highly unusual, he told Robert. His white blood cell count has stabilized. His appetite has returned. I don't understand what's changed. Robert understood. He had watched Rosa work her simple magic day after day. While 15 specialists had focused on treating Marcus's cancer, Rosa had focused on healing Marcus's spirit. She had given him a reason to fight that had nothing to do with medical protocols and everything to do with hope. The shocking breakthrough came on Friday morning. Marcus, who hadn't laughed in months, giggled when Rosa pretended his IV pole was a superhero communication device. The sound of his laughter echoed through the mansion like music. Robert stood in the doorway watching his son actually play for the first time since his diagnosis. Marcus was weak, pale, and still very sick. But he was alive in a way he hadn't been for months. He had hope. When Dr. Chen called with the latest test results, her voice was filled with amazement. Mr. Wellington, I can't explain this medically, but Marcus's condition has stabilized dramatically. The tumor growth has stopped. His body is responding to treatments that weren't working before. It's like something fundamental has changed. Robert looked at Rosa, who was sitting beside Marcus's bed teaching him to fold paper airplanes with simple copy paper. They weren't expensive therapeutic toys or cutting-edge medical devices. They were simple paper airplanes that cost nothing and meant everything. Something has changed, Robert whispered, tears streaming down his face. Someone taught my son how to hope again. 2 years later, the Wellington mansion buzzed with different sounds entirely. Marcus, now 9 years old and cancer-free, ran through the halls wearing a full Superman costume, his thick brown hair bouncing as he chased the family's new puppy. His latest medical scans showed no trace of cancer, baffling doctors who had given him weeks to live. Rosa no longer lived in the servants' quarters. Robert had converted an entire wing of the mansion into a beautiful apartment for her, complete with her own kitchen, where she continued to make the simple soups and meals that had helped save Marcus's life. She had become family in every way that mattered. The medical equipment was gone, replaced by children's artwork and photos of Marcus's recovery journey. The room where he had nearly died now served as his playroom, filled with superhero figures and books. On the wall hung a framed picture of Marcus and Miguel, drawn by Marcus himself, showing 2 boys in Superman capes flying together. Robert had established the Rosa Martinez Foundation for Childhood Cancer, focusing not on expensive treatments, but on emotional support alongside medical care. Rosa traveled to children's hospitals across the country, sharing her superhero training approach with families facing similar battles. Her simple methods had helped dozens of children find the strength to fight. The doctor saved Marcus's body, Robert often told people. But Rosa saved his soul. She taught him that healing starts with hope and hope starts with love. Marcus, now healthy and thriving, had become a spokesperson for the foundation. Rosa taught me that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared, he would tell other children in hospitals. It means you remember that someone believes you're a superhero even when you don't feel like one. The most powerful medicine had been the simplest, seeing Marcus not as a patient to be cured, but as a child to be loved. Sometimes the most important treatment can't be prescribed or purchased. Sometimes it just takes someone who believes in the superhero hiding inside a scared little boy. If Marcus and Rosa's story touched your heart, and you'd like to hear more inspiring stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Every week I share stories about how simple acts of love can change everything. Which moment in their journey resonated with you most? Share in the comments below. Was it when Marcus first smiled when he started eating Rosa's soup? Or when he called her his real-life Wonder Woman? Your stories of everyday heroes matter too.